I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I'm not a paranoid person. I don't believe in ghosts. I've never had a sleep disorder, and I don't drink on the job. I'm telling you this because I know how it's going to sound, and I need you to understand that I've already gone through every rational explanation I can think of. I've been going through them for weeks now. None of them fit. I work as a facilities monitor at a water treatment plant about 40 minutes outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. It's not a glamorous job. Mostly I sit in a control room from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, and I watch gauges, check flow rates, and make sure nothing trips an alarm. The plant runs almost entirely on automation. My job, if I'm being honest, is to be a warm body in a chair in case something goes wrong that the system can't handle on its own. In the 3 years I've been doing this, that's happened exactly twice. Once was a sensor malfunction that took me about 4 minutes to address. The other time, a raccoon got into one of the pump housings and I had to call animal control. That's the kind of excitement we're talking about. The real core of the job, the thing they actually care about from a compliance standpoint, is the logs. Every shift, I fill out what's officially called the Nightly Operations and Incident Report, but everyone just calls it the logbook. It's a thick binder, green cover, sits on the desk next to the main console. Every hour on the hour, I write an entry. I record the time, the status of the primary systems, any fluctuations in pressure or chemical levels, and a short note about anything unusual. If nothing unusual happened, I write, "No irregularities observed." I've written that phrase probably 2,000 times. It's muscle memory at this point. My handwriting even changes when I write it. Gets a little faster, a little more slanted. Because I've done it so many times, my hand just sort of knows the motion. The logbook is important because the state audits us. If there's ever a discrepancy between what the automated system recorded and what the on-shift monitor noted, it becomes a whole thing. People get called in. Reports get filed. So you learn early on to be precise. You don't estimate the time. You don't round the numbers. You check the clock. You check the gauges, and you write down exactly what you see. I was always good at that. My supervisor told me once that my logs were some of the cleanest he'd ever reviewed. I took a weird amount of pride in that, honestly. It's a small thing, but when your job is mostly sitting in silence for 8 hours, you hold on to whatever you can. Okay, so, the night this started was a Thursday. March 6th. I remember the date because my sister had texted me earlier that evening about plans for my nephew's birthday, which was coming up on the 15th, and I'd been thinking about what to get him. That's not relevant to what happened, but I mention it because my memory of that night is sharp. I wasn't foggy. I wasn't half asleep. I'd had a full night's rest the day before. I'd eaten dinner around 8, and I came in feeling completely fine. The first few hours were normal. I did my 10 o'clock entry, my 11 o'clock entry, my midnight entry. Everything was clean. Pressure was steady. Chlorine levels were in range. Nothing to report. Around 12:30, I got up to do a walkthrough of the building, which I usually do once or twice a night just to stretch my legs. The plant is mostly one big open space with the treatment tanks and filtration systems, and then there's a hallway that leads to the chemical storage area, a break room, and a couple of offices that are only used during the day. I walked the loop, checked the doors, checked the emergency exits, came back, maybe 15 minutes total. When I sat back down, I opened the logbook to get ready for my 1 o'clock entry. And I noticed something. There was already an entry at 1 a.m. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 12:47. The 1 a.m. entry had already been filled in, and it was in my handwriting. I don't mean handwriting that looked similar to mine. I mean, it was my handwriting. The slight upward slant I have on my capital letters. The way I write my sevens with a little crossbar, which is a habit I picked up in college. The way I abbreviate pressure as psi with a period after it, which not everyone does. It was mine. The entry read 0100, all systems nominal, psi, steady at 42, chlorine at 1.8 parts per million, no irregularities observed. I looked at the gauges. Pressure was at 41.6. Chlorine was at 1.7. Close, but not exact. And it was 12:47, not 1 o'clock. The entry was 13 minutes early, and the numbers were slightly off. I sat there for a while and just stared at it. I flipped back through the previous entries to make sure I wasn't losing track of things. 10 o'clock, my entry. 11 o'clock, my entry. Midnight, my entry. All in my handwriting, all accurate, all ones I clearly remembered writing. And then 1 o'clock, also in my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. The first thing I thought was that I was being messed with. There's another monitor, Dale, who works the shift before mine. We overlap for about 10 minutes during handoff. Dale's got a dry sense of humor, and I thought maybe he'd come back in and written something in the book as a joke. But that didn't make sense for a couple of reasons. First, the entry was in my handwriting, not Dale's. Dale writes in all caps, very blocky, very distinct. Second, the building was locked. I'd checked the doors during my walkthrough not 5 minutes earlier. And third, Dale would never tamper with the logbook. Nobody would. It's a compliance document. You could lose your job. I sat there until 1 o'clock. I watched the gauges. At exactly 1 a.m., the pressure read 42.0 and the chlorine read 1.8. Exactly what the entry said. I want you to think about that for a second. The entry was written before the readings matched. When I first saw it at 12:47, the numbers were wrong. By 1 o'clock, they were right. As if whoever wrote it, as if I, apparently, had known what the gauges were going to say 13 minutes in advance. I didn't write a new entry. I didn't cross it out. I just sat there looking at it, and then I turned the page and tried to move on. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe I'd written it absent-mindedly and just didn't remember. People do things on autopilot, especially in repetitive jobs. Maybe I'd glanced at the gauges, mentally rounded the numbers, scribbled the entry, and then gotten up for my walkthrough without it fully registering. The brain does funny things when you're in a routine. That's what I told myself. And I mostly believed it. Mostly. The 2 o'clock entry was normal. I wrote it myself, consciously, carefully. Same with 3 and 4. By 5 o'clock, I'd almost forgotten about it. When my shift ended and the morning crew came in, I didn't mention it. I went home, I slept, and I came back the next night feeling like the whole thing had been a minor glitch in an otherwise unremarkable evening. Friday night. March 7th. I came in, did the handoff with Dale, sat down at the console. Everything was fine. I made my 10 o'clock entry. 11 o'clock, same thing. I was being extra attentive, I'll admit that. I was watching myself write each entry as if to prove to myself that I was doing it. See, you're picking up the pen. You're writing the time. You're checking the gauge. You're writing the number. Normal. You're normal. At 11:40, I got up to use the bathroom. The restroom is just down the hall from the control room, maybe a 30-second walk. I was gone for, 3 or 4 minutes. When I came back and sat down, I pulled the logbook toward me just to glance at my 11 o'clock entry, to reassure myself. And under my 11 o'clock entry, there was a new line. It wasn't a full entry. It was a note written between the lines in my handwriting. Smaller than usual, like I'd been trying to squeeze it in. It said, checked east corridor door. Loss of seal on gasket, minor. Noted for day crew. I had not checked the east corridor door. I had not been to the east corridor at all that night. The east corridor is on the far side of the plant, past the filtration tanks. It's not part of my normal walk-through route. There was no reason for me to have gone there, but the note was in my handwriting. I got up and I walked to the east corridor. I told myself I was doing it just to prove the note wrong, just to confirm that there was nothing wrong with the door so I could move on and chalk this up to whatever was going on with my head. It took me about 5 minutes to get there. The east corridor is not well lit at night. The overheads are on a motion sensor, and they flicker on one section at a time as you walk, which means there's always a stretch of dark hallway ahead of you. I'm used to it, but that night I noticed it more than usual. I got to the door. It's a heavy steel exterior door with a rubber gasket seal around the frame to keep the elements out. I looked at the gasket. The bottom right section was pulling away from the frame. Minor, just like the note said. You could see a thin line of outside air coming through. It wasn't something that would cause a problem, but it was the kind of thing you'd flag for maintenance. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. I just stood there staring at that gasket. Then I walked back to the control room and I sat down, and I didn't touch the logbook for the rest of the night. I made my remaining entries on a separate piece of paper and transferred them in the morning, just before handoff, copying them into the book quickly, so the record would be complete. I didn't look at anything else that had been written. I didn't want to see if there was more. I took Saturday night off. I called in and said I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. I spent that night at home in bed, not sleeping, just staring at the ceiling and trying to think of explanations. Carbon monoxide was the first thing I considered. I'd read stories online about people who thought they were experiencing strange events, and it turned out they had a CO leak in their home or workplace. So on Sunday, before my shift, I bought a handheld carbon monoxide detector from the hardware store and brought it in with me. I tested the control room, the hallway, the break room, the bathrooms. Everything read normal. 0 parts per million across the board. Sunday night, March 9th. I was dreading it, but I went in. I sat down. I opened the logbook to a fresh page and I made my 10 o'clock entry. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I took the logbook and I set it on my lap. I kept it with me. If something was going to appear in it, I wanted to be holding it when it happened. I wanted to see it. For 2 hours, nothing. I made my 11 o'clock entry with the book on my lap. I made my midnight entry the same way. I did not get up from the chair. I did not go to the bathroom. I did not do a walkthrough. I sat perfectly still and I watched the book and the gauges and the clock. At 12:22, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister, a photo of a birthday cake she was considering ordering for my nephew. I looked at the photo. I typed back, "The blue one looks good." I set my phone on the desk. The whole exchange took maybe 20 seconds. I looked down at the logbook. There was a new line under my midnight entry. My handwriting, it said 0100, psi, at 41. Chlorine at 1.9 parts per million. Slight variation in flow rate on tank 3 within acceptable range. No action required. I had been holding the book. It had been on my lap the entire time. 20 seconds. I had looked away for 20 seconds. My hands were shaking. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I looked at the clock. 12:23. I looked at the gauges. Pressure was at 41.4. Chlorine was at 1.8. Tank 3 flow rate was steady, no variation. I sat there and I waited. At 12:51, the flow rate on tank 3 dipped. just slightly. It went from its normal output down by about 2%, held there for a few minutes, and then came back up. Well within acceptable range. No action required. At 1 o'clock, the pressure was at 41 even, and the chlorine read 1.9. Exactly what the entry said. I need to pause here and tell you what this felt like, because I think it's important. It wasn't like a horror movie. I wasn't terrified. I mean, I was scared, yes, but it was a different kind of scared. It was the kind of fear you feel when something is wrong with you and you don't know what it is. Like when you find a lump, or you start forgetting words. I wasn't afraid of the logbook. I was afraid of myself. I was afraid that something was happening to my brain, and I was experiencing some kind of dissociative episode where I was writing entries and not remembering them. And the reason the entries were accurate was because I was somehow unconsciously processing the data and predicting the trends, which honestly, after 3 years of doing this job, isn't entirely implausible. The readings follow patterns. Someone who's been watching them long enough might develop an intuition for where they're headed. That's what I told myself. And on Monday morning, I called my doctor and made an appointment. I went in on Tuesday, explained that I'd been having some memory concerns, and asked for a referral to a neurologist. He gave me one, but the earliest appointment was 3 weeks out. In the meantime, he told me to monitor the situation and come back if anything changed dramatically. He suggested I might be experiencing stress-related dissociation and recommended I get more sleep. I didn't tell him about the logbook specifically. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was losing my mind. I worked Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Nothing unusual. I wrote my entries. I checked them. They were all mine, all accurate, all written in real time. I started to relax a little. Maybe it had been a fluke. Maybe I'd been more tired than I thought, and it was over now. Thursday night, March 13th. I came in and sat down, and everything was fine until midnight. I was actually in a decent mood. I'd found a birthday present for my nephew, a set of building blocks that his mom said he'd been wanting, and I'd ordered it online during my dinner break. I was thinking about the party, about whether I should bring anything else, about normal things. At midnight, I made my entry. Everything was clean. I closed the book and set it on the desk. I got up and went to the break room to heat up the coffee I'd brought in a thermos. The microwave in the break room is old and slow, and it takes about 2 minutes to get anything reasonably warm. I stood there and watched the mug rotate behind the little glass door. The microwave beeped. I took the coffee out. It was still only lukewarm, but I didn't bother running it again. I walked back to the control room. The logbook was open. I had closed it. I specifically remembered closing it because I'd noticed a small coffee stain on the front cover, and I'd wiped it with my sleeve before setting it down. It had been closed. Now it was open to the current page, and there was a new entry. The entry was at 2 a.m. It was 12:11. The entry was nearly 2 hours early. It read, 0200, all systems nominal, psi at 43, chlorine at 1.7 parts per million, no irregularities observed. Note, south perimeter light out, maintenance request submitted. I read it 3 times. Then I walked to the south side of the building and looked out the window. The perimeter light was on. It was working fine. I could see it from where I stood, casting that familiar yellow-orange glow over the gravel lot and the chain-link fence. I went back to the control room and sat down. I sipped my lukewarm coffee. I watched the clock. At 1:38, the south perimeter light went out. I saw it happen on the exterior camera feed. 1 second it was on, and the next it was dark. Just like that. The camera adjusted its exposure and the south lot went black. I did not submit a maintenance request. I refused to. I sat there and I looked at the entry and I thought, I am not going to do what this says I did. I am not going to submit the request. Because if I submit it, then the entry is accurate. And if the entry is accurate, then either I wrote it and don't remember, or something else wrote it. And I don't know which of those options is worse. I did not submit the request. I left the entry as it was. When the morning crew came in, the shift supervisor noticed the south light was out on the camera feed and asked me about it. I said I hadn't noticed. He submitted the maintenance request himself. The log said I had submitted it. I hadn't. But someone did. It was close enough to true that if anyone audited the book, it wouldn't raise a flag. That bothered me more than anything. It wasn't just predicting events anymore. It was predicting a version of events that was almost right, but not quite. Like it was describing a night that was running parallel to mine, just slightly off to the side. I started bringing a camera with me. Not a fancy one, just my phone propped up on the desk, set to record video. I wanted to catch myself writing the entries if that's what was happening. I wanted proof, one way or the other. Friday night. March 14th. I set my phone up at the start of the shift, angled so it could see the desk, the logbook, and my hands. I hit record. I sat down and I worked. The shift was quiet. I made my entries at the proper times. I reviewed the footage during my 2 o'clock walkthrough by rewinding the video on my phone. I could see myself sitting at the desk, writing at 10, at 11, at midnight, at 1. Normal. No mystery entries. I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost laughed. And then I looked at the logbook. And under my 1 o'clock entry, there was a new line. Small, squeezed between the lines. My handwriting. It said, checked footage, nothing visible. I went cold. Not figuratively. I physically felt the temperature in my body drop. My hands went numb. I looked at the footage again. I scrubbed through it carefully, minute by minute, from 1 o'clock to 1:55, when I'd gotten up for my walkthrough. I could see the book sitting on the desk the entire time. My hands were visible. I never touched the pen. I never opened the book. But the line was there. In ink. In my handwriting. And the thing that really got to me, the thing I keep coming back to, is what it said. Checked footage. Nothing visible. It wasn't describing an event at the plant. It was describing what I was doing right now. It was describing me standing in the hallway, reviewing the footage, finding nothing. It knew I was going to check. The next 2 weeks are harder to talk about, not because anything dramatically escalated, but because the nature of the thing changed, and it changed in a way that made it harder to separate from my own thoughts. The entries kept appearing, not every night. Some nights were clean, Monday might be normal, Tuesday might be normal, and then Wednesday I'd find an entry I didn't write. There was no pattern I could identify. I tried tracking it. Was it correlated with weather, with my mood, with the day of the week, with what I ate, with how much sleep I'd gotten? Nothing lined up. It was random, or at least it felt random. But the content of the entries shifted. Early on, they'd been purely technical. System readings, facility notes, the kind of dry operational data that fills every page of every logbook I've ever written. Now they started including other things, small things, personal things. One entry, dated 1 a.m. on March 19th, read, Psi at 40, chlorine at 2.0 parts per million, no irregularities. Thought about calling Mom, but it's too late. I had been thinking about calling my mother. She'd left me a voicemail earlier that day, and I'd been meaning to call her back. And at some point during the shift, the thought had crossed my mind. but I decided it was too late to call. Another entry from March 21st at 3 a.m. All systems nominal. Neck is stiff. Should have brought the other chair cushion. My neck was stiff. I'd been thinking about the cushion I usually brought but had left in my car that night. These weren't predictions about the future. These were descriptions of the present, of my present, of things happening inside my head that I had not said out loud, had not written down, had not communicated to anyone. I began to feel watched, which I know is the most predictable thing I could say, but I need to be specific about what I mean. I didn't feel like someone was hiding in the building. I didn't feel a presence in the room. What I felt was that the logbook was aware, that when it was open on the desk, it was receiving information from me the way a microphone picks up sound. That my thoughts were being transcribed somewhere I couldn't see and then appearing on the page. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. I saw the neurologist on March 25th. He ran some tests, asked me questions, did an MRI. Everything came back normal. No lesions, no tumors, no signs of neurological deterioration. He said I seemed healthy. He asked if the memory issues were still occurring, and I said yes, and he suggested a follow-up in 3 months and possibly a sleep study. I thanked him and left. I didn't tell him about the logbook. The last week of March is when I started thinking about quitting. Not just the job, but the whole thing. Going to the logbook, trying to figure it out, caring about it at all. Part of me wanted to just accept it. Strange things happen. People experience things they can't explain, and then they move on. Maybe this was just something that was happening at this plant, in this control room, with this particular binder, and if I left, it would stop. But on the night of March 27th, I found an entry that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. I came in for my shift. I did the handoff with Dale. I sat down. I opened the logbook to the current page so I could see where Dale's last entry ended and where mine would begin. Dale's shift ends at 10, and his final entry was at 9 o'clock, the last one before I take over. And below it, there should have been blank space. There wasn't. There were entries for my entire shift, all 8 hours, 10 p.m. through 5 a.m., every single one filled in my handwriting, with readings and notes and timestamps. An entire night's worth of log entries, already completed, before I had done anything at all. I read through them. They were detailed. They were accurate in format. They referenced specific gauge readings, specific system statuses. They included notes about a walkthrough at 11:30, a coffee break at 1:15, a bathroom trip at 3. They described a completely normal, uneventful shift, except for the last entry, the 5 a.m. entry. It was different from the others. It was longer, and it didn't describe the plant. It said, 0500, all systems nominal. Final check before shift end. Saw someone in the east corridor during walkthrough. Thought it was maintenance, but no one was scheduled. Did not investigate further. Heading out at 6. I read that entry sitting in the control room at 10:04 p.m. I had 7 hours and 56 minutes before the thing it described was supposed to happen. I had not done my 11:30 walkthrough. I had not taken a coffee break. I had not done any of the things the log said I was going to do. So I decided I wouldn't. I'd decide. I would sit in that chair, in that room, and I would not leave it. I would not walk the corridors. I would not go to the break room. I would not follow the script that was written out in front of me. I would sit and I would wait, and I would prove that the log was wrong. And I did. For 7 hours, I sat in that chair. I didn't get up to use the bathroom. I didn't heat up my coffee. I didn't do a walkthrough. I drank water from a bottle I had at the desk, and I made my real entries on a separate sheet of paper, and I did not touch the logbook. At 5 a.m., I was still in my chair. I had not gone to the East Corridor. I had not seen anyone. The log was wrong. For the first time, it was verifiably, completely wrong. I felt something close to triumph, although it was more like the feeling you get when you've been holding your breath for too long and you finally let it out. I leaned forward to write my actual 5 a.m. entry on the separate sheet of paper. And as I leaned forward, I glanced at the security monitor, the one that shows the camera feeds from around the building. 8 small squares on one screen: parking lot, North Corridor, South Corridor, East Corridor, chemical storage, break room, main floor, and the front entrance. In the East Corridor feed, there was someone standing at the far end of the hallway. The lights had activated, which meant the motion sensor had been triggered, which meant something was physically there. The figure was distant, grainy, just a shape on a low-resolution camera. It could have been anyone. It could have been a shadow or a trick of the old camera struggling with the fluorescent light. But it was 5 a.m., and it was the East Corridor, and the log had said I would see someone there. I hadn't gone to the East Corridor. I hadn't seen anyone during a walkthrough. But there was someone there. The log hadn't been wrong about what would happen. It had been wrong about how I would encounter it. I watched the feed for maybe 30 seconds. The figure didn't move. Then the motion sensor timed out and the hallway lights clicked off, and the feed went dark. When the lights didn't come back on, I told myself the figure had been a glitch, a camera artifact, a play of light on the wall. I finished my shift. I handed off to the morning crew. I drove home. I didn't go back the next night. I called in and said I needed some time. My supervisor asked if everything was okay, and I said I just needed a few personal days, and he said that was fine. That was almost 2 weeks ago now. I've been sitting with this, trying to decide what to do. I requested a transfer to the day shift, and I'm waiting to hear back. I haven't told anyone at work what happened. I haven't gone back to look at the logbook. I don't know what's in it now. I don't know if there are entries for the nights I wasn't there, written in my handwriting, describing shifts I never worked. Part of me wants to go look. Part of me thinks that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. What I keep thinking about, the thing that won't leave me alone, is the 5 a.m. entry. The one that said I saw someone in the East Corridor and did not investigate further. Because the log has been wrong about details before. The south light, the maintenance request, small things. It gets the shape of events right, but sometimes the specifics are slightly off. It described me seeing someone during a walkthrough. I didn't do a walkthrough. But there was someone there. So here's what I can't stop turning over in my head. The thing that wakes me up at 2 in the afternoon when I should be sleeping. The log said I saw someone and did not investigate. I didn't go to the East Corridor. I never saw anyone in person. I only saw a shape on a camera. And I didn't investigate. The outcome was exactly the same. Every time I've tried to deviate from what the log says I'm going to do, the result ends up the same. Not the method, not the details, but the result. As if it doesn't matter what I choose. As if the log isn't recording what I do. It's recording what happens, and I just happen to be there. I have my neurologist follow-up scheduled. I'm going to go. I'm going to tell him everything this time, all of it, the full story, and I'm going to let him tell me what he thinks is wrong with me. Maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe the MRI missed it. Maybe this is what a very specific, very quiet kind of breakdown looks like. But there's one more thing. Yesterday, I drove out to the plant during the day. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the parking lot for a while. I don't know why. I think I wanted to see it in sunlight, to remind myself that it was just a building, just concrete and metal and water, nothing more. While I was sitting there, I got a text from my supervisor. He said the day shift transfer was approved and I could start next Monday. I should have felt relieved. And I did for about 5 seconds. Then I thought about the logbook, about whoever works the night shift after me, about them sitting in that chair, opening the binder, and finding entries in handwriting that isn't theirs. Or worse, finding entries in handwriting that is. I thought about texting my supervisor to ask who's being assigned to cover my old shift, but I didn't. I put my phone in the cup holder and I drove home, and I sat on my couch and I didn't think about it for the rest of the day. Or I tried not to. This morning I woke up and there was a note on the pad I keep on my nightstand. The pad I use for grocery lists, reminders, things I need to do the next day. I use it because I work nights and my schedule is strange and I forget things if I don't write them down. The note said, in my handwriting, "Don't take the day shift." I don't remember writing it. I've been staring at it for 3 hours. It's my handwriting.